Are you open to considering a tax increase on the...
No. Did you listen? Were you here earlier? No, I'm not being a jerk.
Yeah, you are. All right, so maybe not to that specific reporter, but it's very clear that Kevin McCarthy will not support tax increases whatsoever in his so-called debt limit negotiations. So now, look, McCarthy then went on to explain, well, we don't have to tax rich people. No. We're actually making more revenue. You see, we're bringing in more in GDP. So therefore, we don't have to raise taxes to increase revenue. Okay, then why are you making these massive amounts of cuts? Cuts to social programs that would have a devastating impact on poor people, adding work requirements into things like Medicaid, the SNAP program, which, by the way, 41% of SNAP recipients already work. But adding the work requirements on there does nothing to help people get jobs. And it actually doesn't do anything to help anyone. It just helps politicians cut people off if they're not able to find work. Look, and by the way, I mentioned that work requirements because I recently showed you this video of McCarthy lying about the benefits of work requirements. Let's take a look at that.
What work requirements actually do help people get a job. Every data point shows that, and it helps people move forward. So the public wants it. Both parties want it. The idea that they want to put us into a default because they will not work with on that is ludicrous to me.
And you're talking about SNAP. What program are you talking about specifically?
Look, we're talking about all the programs because it helps people get into a job. And what does it mean when somebody gets in a job? They get better pay. They're able to buy their houses, but it also helps our supply chain going forward.
No, none of that's true. None of that's true. No, it doesn't help people get jobs. Look, our economy is structured around having a permanent amount of people who are not employed. So adding work requirements, and a lot of those people who are not employed obviously are either disabled, or retired, or can't afford childcare to be able to go to work, and they have these benefits because they are below the poverty line. They meet those requirements to be poor enough to get these programs. And so with that in mind, adding on work requirements to these programs is just absolute cruelty. And that's the point. The cruelty is the point. So now, that said, let's do a numbers comparison here, okay? So now, McCarthy, again, he's pushing this, we got to do all these cuts. We have to have these cuts in all of these different programs so that we can save money. Now, he just admitted that, we're taking in 19.6% of GDP in revenue. Look at that. We're doing fantastic. Look at all the tax revenue we're taking in. And he is right when he says that, again, U.S. revenue in 2022 is 19.6% of GDP, according to the CBO numbers. That's better than the annual average of 17.4% in the 5 decades prior. Now, that said, what he wants to do with all of these work requirements would barely make a dent in the debt. Work requirements would save the government about $1 billion a year, according to the CBO. $1 billion. How much would raising taxes net in revenue? In 2021, Senators Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders proposed charging billionaires a 3% wealth tax and household trusts worth between 50 million and 1 billion of a tax of just 2% a year. That would produce about $3 trillion in revenue over the next decade. So that's $300 billion a year in estimated government revenue versus what McCarthy wants to do. Again, this very small tax on people's wealth, a 3% wealth tax for the richest Americans. You know, again, $3 trillion in revenue over the next 10 years, $300 billion a year versus $1 billion. But, you know, if they tax the rich, well, then, of course, that would affect their donors and it would affect the people that they actually work for. And it wouldn't hurt poor people. Because, again, what we're talking about here is the whole point of these cuts. It is not to save money. It is not to reduce the amount of spending. It is to punish poor people for being poor. That's it. At the expense of the richest Americans. And so it's doubly worse when not only did he immediately say, no, but then all the ghouls behind him were laughing at the suggestion. You increase taxes on the rich? That's a good one. You know that's never going to happen. Well, unfortunately, in our government, it won't. Because the government right now is run by rich people for rich people that get donations by other rich people. So, of course, that's why they're never going to do a wealth tax unless we are able to get money out of politics. And unfortunately, right now, it seems very far off.